To teach us how to effectively make our voices heard at these meetings, we invited a man who refuses to remain silent about the things that matter. This is a homecoming for our first presenter. He was born and raised right here in Meriden, graduating from Maloney High School with honors. He later attended Central Connecticut State University, which is where I went, where he majored in marketing. He did a lot of blue-collar jobs before becoming a successful insurance agent and realtor. In 2011, he began the first of his 4 terms in the Connecticut General Assembly, where he founded the Conservative Caucus and served as its first chairman. He is currently serving his 2nd term representing the people of Connecticut's 16th State Senate District, which includes Prospect, Southington, Woolpit, and parts of Cheshire and Waterbury. A man known as Connecticut's fiercest freedom fighter, please welcome our friend and fellow rabble-rouser, State Senator Rob Sampson.
Good morning, fellow patriots.
Good morning.
Good morning. I don't know if I can follow Mark, Mitch doing Mark. Lit. We're going to try our best. Thank you, first and foremost, to CTRA for putting on this great event and inviting me here to be one of our speakers. I give a lot of speeches in the state senate, but this is a much more enjoyable experience for me because presumably you actually want to hear what I have to say. And thank you for that super generous biography and introduction. I know many of the people in the room, and I was delighted to see such a great showing today. There's a much bigger crowd than I had expected, and that is very pleasing to the eye. I won't further introduce myself other than to say that I am super excited about our conservative movement and very much so about the November elections coming up. And I would say to take my inspiration very, very seriously because it takes a lot to inspire me after the battles that I have been through in the legislature. I've been on the losing side of everything you can imagine, from busways to budgets. And that's been for a long time, but I do feel a tide turning. These days, Republicans are fighting, the usual things, the TCI gas tax, zoning issues, election laws, crime wave, car thefts, all kinds of things that we are familiar with. But I want to talk about a specific issue today, just as an example for our action agenda, and that is the recent battle over the mask mandates and the governor's emergency powers. And to me, this is a great example to illustrate the importance of on the action agenda, which my topic that Ann provided to me is attend every available meeting. And Ann, where's Ann sitting anyway? Thank you for giving me a very tough topic to make exciting. Thank you very much. And putting me behind this giant podium. And asking me to speak for 20 minutes. Yeah, thank you very much. I am set up for failure in a very big way, but I am going to make lemonade out of this. I promise you. Attend every meeting, to me, means show up. That's what it means in simple terms. And of course, showing up is important. Back in the early days of COVID-19, when there were only a few of us who were speaking out publicly against the business shutdown and the mandates, particularly masks in schools, obviously things were not looking good. It was a very, very minority position. And to say that we were outnumbered as far as public opinion goes would be a big understatement. There were some rallies at the Capitol and that kind of thing, but nothing really took off. And in fact, part of me was a little concerned about those rallies because it's very easy for the majority in this state to marginalize you if you show up in small numbers. They can just say, well, that's all there is. There's like 10 people out there. Why should we be concerned about what they have to say? That's when it occurred to me and to many others, and I'm fighting with this microphone because it seems like you've got to be right in front of it, that it might be easier, rather than trying to turn people out at the state capitol, than to do something different and actually try and approach things at a more grassroots local level. And think about that for a second. We've had 1,000 people show up at the state capitol lots of times for different things, and it doesn't seem to have much of an impact. But then sometimes you can get just 10 or 20 people at a local Board of Ed meeting, and trust me when I tell you, they notice. So that movement began really right at the start of the COVID pandemic and the reaction that many of us freedom-loving people had when we said, no, people should be making their own choices about these mandates, about masks and vaccines and so forth. And that movement really has taken off and brought us to where we are today, which is kind of the theme of what I'm going to talk about. But I want to take just a moment to recognize a specific individual in this room. There are many people that have been involved in this grassroots effort across the state to try and reclaim freedom and to use this mechanism at the local level, but none more than my friend Susan Zabahansky, who's sitting right over there. That lady deserves a lot of So the last year, Sue and I, and plenty of others, some people we know and lots of people we don't know, have been duplicating this effort by traveling around the state, sitting in people's living rooms, and teaching them, basic civics education and how to engage their local governments to force change. I mentioned it on the Senate floor this past week during the debate over these emergencies and the masks. But basically that's what we're doing. We're reteaching civics and how our government is supposed to work to Americans who are upset, but they simply don't know what to do. And now we are winning. We are legitimately winning. Things are changing in the state, and you can feel it. And I know it's easy to get down a lot of times about our movement because we are outnumbered in a big way. But after everything I've been through in my life, this is a ray of sunshine. The sun is peeking through the clouds, in my opinion. But this is the most important lesson and wake-up call in politics that I think we've seen. And that is the realization there's no magic bullets. There's no one coming to save us. However, a relatively few people who are committed and organized and vocal at the right level of government can move mountains. And they have. It's something I think about a lot. And without getting into an in-depth conversation about mass formation psychosis, it's worth just stepping back for a second and thinking about how our society functions and how ideas become popular and take hold. How an idea held by just a few people can ultimately grow and transform public opinion into major change. Think back to 1774, 1775, for example. If you were there, it's probably a little easier, but we'll just have to do our best. Wouldn't it have been an amazing experience to know somebody like a Thomas Paine? This is a guy who, along with people who were thinking like him, helped make and grow the case for independence for King George from a very grassroots standpoint. But that idea had to start as a seed somewhere and grow into what ultimately became our revolution and our great country. And I wonder all the time, did that happen organically, or was it simply the work of people who were already kind of in on the action, using every scrap of opportunity to further the cause and promote it until it became the commonplace majority idea? And I think it was mentioned, Mark, you mentioned my college education. I went to school for marketing. Politics, in many ways, is marketing. And this mentality works for everything. This is how we choose the products that we buy, the music we listen to, movies either succeed or fail based on the notion of people promoting them at a grassroots level. And that happens with every issue of politics. And the madness that we see now with COVID, regarding masks and vaccines and so forth, we all know that much of the information that's out there is inexplicable, it's patently and provably false, but it's still accepted by a great portion of the population as the only reality. And that's why showing up is so important. A problem that I see for Republicans and conservatives is that we don't have anyone in a lot of places who is speaking our message. There are so many hearings and meetings at the state capitol where the Democrats come and they present their case and they push their agenda, and unfortunately there's not even a voice in opposition to say that there's another alternative view. And that's not just there, it happens in a lot of places. Like, ask yourself, who is talking about freedom, about capitalism, or about shrinking the size of government at a Bridgeport Town Council? Nobody. Except for maybe. Thanks for proving me wrong. And thank you for what you do. Yes. So anyway, that explains in a large way, why the cities are so far gone. Because people there are not even hearing our alternative view of reality and pointing out that there's another better way. And it gets to the point where sometimes those views and the people that share them become extinct. And this is how RTCs lose their way too. I've seen it over and over. The more conservative and committed Republicans that serve on their local Republican town committees are the ones that are always the most frustrated with what's going on. And a lot of times they leave because they see the chairman, they see the rest of the committee losing their way, losing their values, they're not true Republicans. But we have to remember, what is the net result of that? When those courageous conservative Republicans leave their RTCs, what they're essentially doing is they're leaving the people that they disagree with in charge. And that's a major problem with what has happened to our Republican Party in this state, and I think across the country. And just to elaborate a little bit more, I mean, I have been in on so many different committee debates at the state capitol, and not to mention votes that just happened without anyone on the Republican side ever speaking up to say, we should do something different. I don't let that happen if I'm in the room or on the committee, but I watch a lot of them, and it does happen. And you know, I speak a lot at the state capitol, and it's usually because I don't even plan to, but I'm sitting here in the room, and the Democrats go on and on about something, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, is anyone going to get up? And I have to. All right, so you guys see my point. We need to show up, both to make sure that the other side of every issue is at least heard, and because when we fail to show up, the Democrats gain more and more ground. And obviously showing up is not the only obstacle that we face when it comes to winning the battle over hearts and minds. There are plenty of other things to overcome. And I wrote myself a note that I should talk about tribalism. And I don't know if you ever considered this. I know I've had this conversation with some of the folks in this room, but human beings are tribal by nature. You know, back in caveman days, we had to be. You know, that's how you survived. You didn't dare set off alone on your, you know, to take care of yourself and get your own cave and go hunting. You needed to be part of a tribe to survive. And you didn't even necessarily even have to like your tribe or your tribal leader. You were stuck there. You just knew that you were dead if you weren't part of that tribe. And I think this plays a big role in politics today because people get caught up in all kinds of tribes. Political parties are tribes in one way or another. But the biggest example I can give you is Trump. We all know people that absolutely positively hate Trump. And we all know people that absolutely positively love Trump. And you can't even have a rational conversation with someone that hates Trump, in my experience. I've tried many times, and I'm sure a lot of you folks have too. People are just blind to the fact that it's just not that black and white. I mean, do they really hate everything that Trump did? They don't like, you know, energy independence or lower taxes. You know what I mean? And that's their argument, that Trump is just pure evil all the time, all day long. But the pro-Trump people are kind of stubborn too. And I fully supported Trump. I mean, please don't get on me for that. I did support Ted Cruz in the primary. That's worth a couple of applause. Somebody out there. Anyway, but no one can deny that Trump is really an amazing patriot, a man who loves his country. But he was not perfect by any stretch. I carry around a tweet for my loyal Trump friends, pointing out some of the things that he advocated for that really don't fall in line with the conservative movement. And I'm happy to share it with you guys after, but it had something to do with raising the smoking age to 21, spending $738 billion, and 12 weeks of paid family leave, all in one tweet. These are not conservative things.
But they're true, right?
The point is that no one is perfect, okay? But we all have to be better at looking at each issue objectively rather than just relying on individuals that we trust. And sadly, politics is complicated so much that you can't really learn about politics in a few minutes. Even people that are directly involved day in and day out don't know everything that's happening because you couldn't possibly. Even serving in the legislature, I don't know what's happening across the building in other committees that I don't sit on. So because politics is complicated, people tend to follow trusted sources. Like, you know, Trump was a trusted source. But sadly, people follow other trusted sources too. Like, God forbid, Chris Murphy or something. This is something we really should try and get away from. And we need to encourage our friends and neighbors to do so also. But think how difficult it is to break people of this behavior. most of my life is dedicated to talking to individual people and trying to convince them to become conservatives. And you know, sometimes you'll be talking to someone and you'll be making progress and they're starting to actually listen to what you have to say, and you're getting there and you're trying to you know, get them to realize that they've had it all wrong all these years. And it works out great until the next time you see them. And then you find out they're still a lost cause. And that's because the moment you left them, they got in the car and they turned the radio to NPR, or they went home and turned CNN on, and you have to start over. And that's because they are just stuck listening to their trusted sources all the time. And there's another issue that I think affects Republicans in general, and I don't want to cast any shade on my Republican colleagues at the Capitol, but some of them I think are different from those in the conservative movement because they don't see the danger ahead. That's really what's missing from them. This is a room full of conservatives, so I'm probably not alone when I talk about this. Do you ever think about what is missing from them and why they don't get the importance of why they have to stand so strong on so many issues? I mean, these people generally have good instincts, they vote Republican, they seem confident on some issues, but then they're easily shaken, you know, with the slightest amount of pushback. And I think that might have something to do with really just not knowing your principles to your core, but I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that some people can see what is on the horizon and some people cannot. We all know people that look at politics like it's sports. You know, oh, the Democrats won this time. Oh, we'll get them next time. You know, the Republicans will catch them. I know many RTCs that are run like that. Sadly, they're willing to take the leftover Democrats that failed in their last election and bring them and run them as Republicans next time. They're like, no, what are you doing? Anyway, but there are people that seriously look at politics like it's the Red Sox versus the Yankees. And that's really just not the right way to look at it. We have to remember what politics is about, and that is pushing our agenda, something the Democrats never forget. And there are people, obviously, that run for political office because of prestige, or because they like the access that gives them whatever.
Don't forget the money, Rob.
Oh yeah, there's so much money in our job, isn't there? Yeah. I'm still waiting for that job. Bottom line, some of us see real danger on the horizon because there is. We are, in fact, losing our country a little more every election. That's important. All right, so that's the second part of this conversation, really, which is first, show up. The second part is to know what we're talking about. And I'm convinced that the number one thing holding back Republicans from more victories, and particularly in Connecticut, is that, generally speaking, we are terrible at messaging. And that's because many of the decision makers in our party fall into the categories that I just mentioned. And they are naturally confused about what our party stands for, and they're always trying to resonate with voters in a reactionary way instead of a proactive way. And the answer, of course, I believe, and if you've heard me speak on this subject before, at the CTRA event, I think it was last year or the year before that, my whole point was that we have to stick to our product, and we need to sell it based on our own faith and confidence in it. It's always amazed me just how much passion Democrats have about the politics that they push, especially when you can't even make sense of it. I don't think they even believe what they're saying, but boy, do they know how to do it with passion. Imagine what advantage we could have if people in our party understood our value system to their core and then could sell it as passionately as the Democrats do. And if we want to be effective at making political change, we need to keep learning and growing and honing our skills to do so. And we need to do it by exuding confidence. I mentioned Trump a few minutes ago, and Mark also mentioned Trump in his opening remark by saying that our party is begging for fighters. That's what our party needs more than anything. We need strong leaders who are unafraid. We need people that understand that enthusiasm is what wins elections. People follow confidence. So let's be proud of our party. Let's be proud of our values, our history, and stand up to anyone who might challenge us. No, we are the party of freedom and opportunity. We are the ones that believe in individuality and tolerance of different cultures and beliefs. Democrats like to tell the lie that the parties somehow have switched over time. Don't let them get away with that. Tell people that civil rights and protecting individuals is why you are a Republican. Remind them that the GOP is the party that was created for the purpose of abolition. And it was our first Republican president, Lincoln, who made it happen, even when the Democrats fought us in Congress and on the battlefield. Tell them that the minimum wage is not a raise for workers. It is a ban on jobs and opportunities. And teach them about the value and importance of capitalism. Someday I hope to get the C letter in action and have it be about capitalism. Take note, Ann. She's not even listening. Anyway, capitalism is the other integral part of our greatness. It is the most important thing ever to happen to mankind. The free and voluntary exchange of goods and services for personal benefit. Sounds like greed, but that is natural, human, and moral. Because there's no force involved. And the results are that everyone is better off today because of it. Every bit of invention and ingenuity is all based in capitalism and how our quality of life is because of this principle. Every other system, socialism, communism, everything requires government force and is therefore immoral in my perspective. Ask people on the other side why they favor an unbalance of freedom or corrupt people at the top deciding who gets what. Teach them that identity politics is just pitting one group of people against another. The individual, that is the smallest minority there is. And that is what is great, not special rules or special groups. Teach them that these American principles are Republican principles. And the reason why we live in the greatest country on earth and that none of us should ever take it for granted. We can do this together. The more people we teach and send into the world to do the same, the sooner we swing the pendulum back and help to preserve the country and our future. I'm sure you can tell I love this country, and I know you guys too. Couple of minutes to try and inspire you. Quote me on this. Oh, I have not even begun. I told you I was working with lemons here, but I saved the lemonade till the end. Our future success depends on our adherence to these principles of our party and our willingness to fight for them. Politics is not a game or a knitting club. It is a fight over whose agenda will guide the future. It is a fight over whether future generations will be citizens or subjects. Throughout the history of our great country, we have done well to move the cause of freedom closer and closer to the ideals found in the Declaration of Independence. The dream of maximum freedom for all citizens and equal opportunity and protection under the law regardless of race and gender, that was Thomas Jefferson's dream in 1776, even though obviously it wasn't realized at that time. And it was Lincoln's dream, too. I said to someone earlier that if you want to make a good speech, you just quote Lincoln. And I'm going to do that right now. Consider how he put it, standing on the aftermath of the battle of one of the most bloody and vicious battles in human history at Gettysburg. This is so important as a message to every Republican since and especially today. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall have not died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. It seems that we are always talking about rebranding our party. There is no need. That is our brand, and we could have none better. And it is our purpose, our only purpose. The reason we exist is to fight for our agenda, a new birth of freedom. The Democrats never stop pushing their agenda. And we cannot forget ours or get sidetracked or convinced that we cannot win because we live in a blue state or the Democrats are just such good liars. Our brand of freedom and limited government is the winning message. And the more we stick to it and bring every issue back to it, the better we will do. The future of Connecticut and the country depends on it. It depends on Republicans knowing what they believe in and fighting for it. And shame on those in our party who are constantly advocating for moderating our message. The path to victory this November is about knowing who we are, what we believe in, and being unafraid to say so. The people, the voters, are ready for fighters, not compromisers. We are Republicans. Let's be proud of our values, our party, our history, and stand up to anyone who would challenge us. And thank you very much for giving me the